My daughter took me to the bank to close a safe deposit box I had not opened in 22 years. She told me the branch was renovating its vault and that every customer had been ordered to remove their belongings before Friday. It sounded reasonable. Most of Meredith's lies sounded reasonable. She had printed the paperwork, marked every place where I needed to sign, and scheduled the appointment between my cardiology checkup and lunch. She even brought the fountain pen my late wife had given me on our 40th anniversary. "Sign with this," Meredith said as we entered the bank. "It always produces the clearest version of your signature." At the time, I thought she was being thoughtful. Later, I understood that she needed the signature to be unmistakable. The banker waiting for us was named Maya Patel. She was perhaps 35, with dark hair tied behind her head and the careful expression of someone who had already been warned that an ordinary appointment might become difficult. She greeted Meredith first. Then she looked directly at me. "Mr. Rourke, before we begin, I need to confirm that you personally wish to close box 418. Meredith answered for me. "Yes, he does." Maya did not look away from my face. "I need to hear it from your father." Meredith gave a small laugh. "Of course. Dad?" "I was told the vault is closing." Maya's expression did not change. "The vault is not closing." Meredith's hand tightened around the leather folder in her lap. "They are changing the box system," she said. "That is what your manager told me." "We are replacing several locks," Maya replied. "Customers are not required to close their boxes." My daughter turned toward me before I could ask another question. "It is still better to remove everything. You have not used the box since before Mom became ill. The annual fee is pointless." She placed 3 forms on the desk. One authorized the box closure. One released the bank from future liability. The third confirmed that all contents had been removed. I picked up the pen. Maya slid a small yellow paper beneath the glass writing surface. At first, I thought it was a receipt. Then I saw the handwriting. "Do not sign. Your daughter tried to access this box 3 times using a power of attorney we could not verify." I read the note twice. Then I covered it with my hand. Meredith leaned closer. "What is that?" "Nothing. It looked like a note. It is a reminder about identification." Maya did not correct me. I placed the fountain pen beside the unsigned forms. "I want to open the box." Meredith's face changed. Only slightly. But I had known my daughter for 49 years. I recognized fear even when she dressed it as impatience. "There is nothing important inside," she said. "Then this will not take long. Dad, you have a doctor's appointment." "We already attended it." "Then we have lunch." "I can survive missing lunch." Maya stood. "Only registered renters may enter the vault. Miss Sloan, you will need to remain here." Meredith opened her folder. "I have his power of attorney." Maya looked at me. "Mr. Rourke, do you want your daughter to accompany you?" For years, my answer to that question would have been automatic. Meredith handled details. She remembered dates, passwords, medications, contracts, and the names of people I had met only once. When my wife became sick, Meredith organized our lives into folders and calendar reminders. I had called it devotion. Sitting in that bank, with Maya's warning beneath my hand, I wondered when devotion had become permission. "No," I said. "I will go alone." Meredith stood so quickly that the chair moved backward. "This is ridiculous. You become overwhelmed in secure spaces. You had a panic episode during your last hospital scan. That machine was 6 inches from my nose. This is a room with metal boxes." Her voice lowered. "Dad, please." The word should have softened me. Instead, it confirmed the note. Maya led me through 2 locked doors and into the vault. The room smelled of metal, dust, and cold air. She used the bank key. I used the small key I had carried for more than 2 decades without remembering why I still kept it. Box 418 slid from the wall. It was longer than I remembered and heavier than it should have been. Maya placed it inside a private viewing room. I will remain outside. If you need assistance, press the button. Before leaving, she added, "Do not allow anyone to remove documents from this room unless you understand what they are." I lifted the lid. Inside was a sealed brown envelope, a microcassette recorder, an old brass key, and a folded document tied with blue string. The envelope carried the handwriting of my former business partner, Thomas Bell. Thomas had been dead for 4 years. Across the front, he had written, "Daniel, if Meredith is standing beside you when this box is opened, do not let her touch anything." My knees weakened. I sat in the small chair and opened the envelope. The first page contained only 3 sentences. "The fire was not Julian's fault. Meredith knows what happened. If Rourke Bell Works is being sold, play the tape before you sign anything." For 22 years, I had believed my son caused the fire that killed a young employee and nearly destroyed our company. For 22 years, Julian had not returned home. I had called him reckless. I had called him a coward. During our final conversation, I told him that a decent man would spend the rest of his life ashamed. He had looked at me for a long time before answering. "I probably will." Then he left. I had not seen him since. Someone knocked hard on the viewing room door. "Dad?" Meredith's voice came through the metal. "Open the door." I placed Thomas's letter back inside the envelope. Then I pressed the assistance button. Maya entered through the opposite door. Meredith was behind her. A security officer stood between them. "What is inside?" Meredith demanded. I lifted the envelope. "You already know." She stared at Thomas's handwriting. Every trace of irritation disappeared. What remained was terror. Thomas was confused before he died. He became angry with the company. He blamed me for removing him from the board. What fire was he writing about? You know which fire? What did you know? Meredith moved toward the table. The security officer raised one hand. "Sir, do you want her to handle the contents?" "No." My daughter stopped. Then she said something I did not understand until much later. "If you open this now, you may destroy 200 families to clear the name of one man who chose to disappear." "What families?" "The employees. What does this have to do with them?" "Everything." Meredith looked at Maya. "This is a private family matter." Maya answered calmly. "It became a banking matter when someone submitted questionable authority to access the box." Meredith turned back to me. "Do not take those papers home. At least let the company attorney review them." "Why?" "Because Thomas was capable of damaging everyone when he was angry." "Did you forge my power of attorney?" She did not answer. That silence told me more than a denial would have. I asked Maya to place the entire box under temporary restricted access. Nothing would leave the vault until an attorney representing me personally could be present. Meredith followed me through the bank lobby. She waited until we reached the parking lot before speaking. "You have no idea what Thomas put in there. That is why I planned to find out. He hated that I discovered what he had done." "What did he do?" She unlocked the car but did not open the door. "The company is being sold." The words struck almost as hard as Thomas's letter. Rourke Bell Works was not merely a company. It occupied 19 acres along the Monongahela River and employed 212 people. For 50 years, we had designed and fabricated ornamental steel, restoration ironwork, bridges, staircases, gates, and structural pieces for historic buildings across the country. Thomas and I had started with a rented furnace, 3 employees, and more confidence than cash. The company had outlived recessions, strikes, lawsuits, one flood, and the fire that destroyed our Eastern fabrication hall. "You cannot sell without my approval." "We have your approval." "No, you do not. You signed the preliminary authorization last month." "I signed permission to evaluate refinancing offers. The document authorized strategic alternatives, including acquisition. You knew I did not understand that as a sale." Meredith opened the driver's door. "The company owes $27 million. I thought I had misheard her. Our debt was $9 million last year." "No. The report you read excluded pension obligations, environmental reserves, and the emergency credit line." "Why would it exclude them?" "Because it was an operating summary." "Why did no one give me the complete report?" "I did. 3 times. I searched my memory. There had been folders. Meetings I postponed. Documents I asked Meredith to summarize because the numbers blurred after several pages." My daughter watched the doubt enter my face. She had become skilled at recognizing that moment. "The buyer assumes every liability," she said. "Pensions remain funded. Most employees keep their jobs. The riverfront land is worth more than the company, and we are out of time." "Who is the buyer?" "Astor Urban Holdings. They build condominiums. They also own industrial businesses." "For how long?" Meredith looked away. "The purchase agreement guarantees operations for 3 years." "And after 3 years?" "No one can guarantee the future." I finally understood why the box mattered. The riverfront land was the most valuable asset in the transaction. If Thomas had left ownership documents, a hidden agreement, or evidence connected to the fire, the sale could collapse. "When does it close?" 12 days. "You were going to tell me after the box was empty." "I was going to tell you after the final employee protections were signed." "You mean after I could no longer stop you?" Meredith's eyes filled with anger. "I have spent 19 years stopping this company from collapsing while you walk through the plant telling stories about the old days. Do not speak to me as if I am stealing a toy from you." "It belongs to me." "That is exactly the problem." She entered the car. I did not. "Get in," she said. "I will call a taxi." "You do not use taxi applications." "I know how to make a telephone call." "Dad, stop behaving like a child." The sentence settled between us. Meredith immediately regretted it. I could see that. But regret did not remove the fact that she had said aloud what she had begun to believe. I closed the car door. Then I walked back into the bank. "My name is Daniel Rourke. I was 74 years old when I learned that my daughter had attempted to enter my safe deposit box with a false power of attorney. At that moment, I believed the story would be about greed. A daughter trying to sell her father's company and destroy whatever documents stood in her way. I was wrong. Greed was present. So were fear, guilt, favoritism, grief, and 22 years of people protecting me from truths they believed I could not survive. Before the week ended, I would discover that Meredith had lied about the fire. Thomas had lied about the ownership of the land. My late wife had hidden letters from our son. And Julian, the child I had spent 2 decades defending in my imagination, had accepted money to disappear. The safe deposit box did not contain one family secret. It contained the reason our family had survived. And the proof that survival had cost more than any of us admitted. Thomas Bell and I met in 1974 at a steel fabrication plant where neither of us expected to remain. I worked the furnace. Thomas inspected finished pieces and irritated everyone by identifying imperfections after we had already decided the work was complete. He was cautious, precise, and suspicious of enthusiasm. I was ambitious, impatient, and convinced that confidence could replace preparation if spoken loudly enough. We became friends because each of us possessed the qualities the other lacked. We became partners because the plant closed 6 months before my wedding and no one else was hiring. My wife, Eleanor, supplied the first real money. Her father had left her a small inheritance. I refused it twice because I believed a husband should not begin a marriage by spending his wife's security. Eleanor told me pride was an expensive hobby. Then she wrote a check for $28,000 and demanded ownership papers. Thomas respected her immediately. He said she was the only person involved who understood business. For the next 46 years, Eleanor reminded us both that he had been correct. Rourke Bell Works began in an abandoned machine shop near the river. We repaired railings, fabricated fire escapes, and produced replacement ironwork for buildings no manufacturer supported anymore. Thomas managed drawings, purchasing, and quality. I found clients and convinced them that two inexperienced men could complete jobs larger companies had rejected. Eleanor kept the books during evenings and raised our children during days. Meredith was born first. She arrived with Eleanor's dark eyes and Thomas's suspicion of disorder. At 9, she created labels for the kitchen shelves. At 12, she identified a billing error that saved the company $6,000. At 15, she worked beside Eleanor in the office and learned payroll before she learned to drive. Julian was 3 years younger. He had my restlessness and the ability to understand machinery by listening to it. He could shape hot metal with a patience he possessed nowhere else. When Julian entered the fabrication hall, workers gathered to watch. When Meredith entered the accounting office, overdue invoices became paid. I praised Julian's talent publicly. I relied on Meredith privately. Parents tell themselves both children are valued. Children measure where the light falls. Meredith studied finance and returned to the company. Julian attended technical school for 1 year, left without completing his certificate, and returned with ideas for modernizing the plant. Thomas distrusted Julian's shortcuts. Eleanor admired his imagination but feared his temper. I saw the younger version of myself and treated every criticism as an attempt to reduce him. Meredith once warned me that Julian had bypassed a purchasing control to order a specialized furnace component. I laughed and said rules should not obstruct initiative. 2 weeks later, when Meredith approved an emergency payment without my signature, I demanded a written explanation. She gave me one. 3 pages. I did not read it. The fire occurred on October 17, 2003. Rourke Bell Works had just secured the largest contract in its history. We were restoring ornamental steelwork for 6 historic railway stations. The schedule was impossible. I accepted it anyway. To increase production, we converted the Eastern Hall into an overnight finishing area. New solvents and coatings were stored there. The ventilation system required upgrades. The local inspector ordered us to stop using the hall until changes were completed. I was in Chicago when the order arrived. Thomas wanted to close the hall. Julian agreed. Meredith calculated that missing the railway deadline would trigger penalties large enough to place the company in default. The hall remained open. 3 nights later, a fire began near the coating station. It spread through stored solvents and reached the roof before the alarm system activated. 17 employees escaped. 1 did not. Benjamin Carter was 26 years old. He had worked for us for 11 months. His wife was pregnant with their first child. The official investigation concluded that an unauthorized heating unit ignited vapor inside the hall. The heater belonged to Julian. Employees said he had used it during late shifts despite warnings. His access code showed that he entered the hall 30 minutes before the fire. Julian denied turning it on. He said he entered to remove the heater after discovering the ventilation shut down. He claimed someone had continued production despite the inspector's order. Meredith produced records showing the shutdown notice had never reached management. Thomas said he had not seen it. I believed them. I did not believe my son. Not because the evidence was complete. Because the evidence matched the story I already carried about him. Julian ignored rules. Julian believed skill excused caution. Julian expected other people to clean up his mistakes. I suspended him from the company. Then the insurance investigators found altered safety logs on his office computer. The logs made it appear that ventilation inspections had been completed. Julian said he had never created them. I asked why they were stored under his employee profile. He had no answer. During our final meeting, he sat across from Thomas, Meredith, Eleanor, and me. He looked exhausted rather than angry. "I did not start the fire," he said. "Then tell us who did," I replied. "That is not the right question. A man is dead. It is the only question." Julian looked toward Meredith. She did not meet his eyes. Then he looked at me. "If I tell you everything, this company closes." That sounds like a threat. It is a warning. I stood and told him to leave. Eleanor tried to follow him. I stopped her. I said Julian needed to face consequences without his mother protecting him. The next morning, he was gone. Thomas told us Julian had accepted responsibility privately and agreed not to contest the insurance findings. A company settlement paid Benjamin Carter's widow. The criminal investigation ended without charges because investigators could not prove intention or direct causation. The railway client kept its contract. The company survived. Our son disappeared. For several years, Eleanor searched for him. She sent letters through old friends, former employers, and technical schools. Most returned unopened. Meredith said Julian did not deserve the power to keep hurting us. Thomas said some people preferred exile to responsibility. I repeated both statements until they felt like my own conclusions. Eleanor never stopped setting a place for Julian on Christmas. I called it denial. She called it refusing to make absence permanent. 22 years later, I sat in my attorney's office with Thomas's letter open before me. Her name was Naomi Price. She had represented me once in a property dispute, but she had never worked for Rourke Bell Works. That distinction mattered. Maya Patel attended through a secure video connection. She confirmed that Meredith had visited the branch 3 times over 6 weeks. Each time, she presented a power of attorney supposedly signed after my heart procedure 2 years earlier. The bank's legal department found inconsistencies in the witness signatures. They attempted to contact me directly. The telephone number in the submitted document belonged to Meredith's office. "Why did you not call the number already attached to my account?" I asked. "We did," Maya said. "Someone answered and said you were recovering from a cognitive episode and could not speak." "Who answered?" "A woman identifying herself as your daughter." Meredith had not merely forged authority. She had created a version of me that could not contradict her. Naomi obtained a court order allowing the box to be opened, documented, and copied in the presence of bank counsel. The originals would remain secured until ownership and evidentiary questions were resolved. We returned that afternoon. This time, Meredith was not informed. Thomas's full letter was 14 pages. He had written it 6 months before his death. The first half described the fire. Thomas admitted receiving the inspector's shutdown order. He gave it to Meredith while I was traveling. They agreed to suspend overnight coding work. But the following day, the railway client threatened to cancel the contract unless production continued. Meredith calculated that cancellation would trigger loan defaults and eliminate at least 100 jobs. Thomas allowed the hall to reopen temporarily. Meredith instructed a supervisor to continue production using reduced shifts. Julian discovered the decision. He argued with both of them. The night of the fire, he entered the hall to remove his heater because he feared it could be blamed if anything happened. The fire began before he reached it. The likely ignition source was not the heater. It was a damaged electrical switch beside the ventilation controls. A maintenance report had identified the switch 2 weeks earlier. Meredith delayed replacement until the next scheduled shutdown. After the fire, Thomas and Meredith removed the inspector's order and maintenance report from the company files. They altered safety logs using Julian's credentials because he had left his password written inside an unlocked desk. They did not intend for Julian to face criminal charges. They intended to create enough uncertainty for the insurance company to accept individual negligence rather than company misconduct. Thomas wrote, "We told ourselves no one would benefit if 200 families lost their income in addition to Benjamin Carter losing his life. We called concealment mercy because the word fraud was harder to carry." I stopped reading. Naomi asked whether I needed a break. No. If I stop now, I may spend another 22 years choosing the easier part. Thomas explained that Julian agreed to remain silent. Meredith told him the company would collapse if the shutdown order and falsified logs became public. Benjamin's widow might receive nothing if the insurer denied the claim. Eleanor's health insurance also depended on the company. At the time, Eleanor was undergoing tests for a heart condition. Julian believed losing coverage could place her at risk. Thomas paid Julian $120,000 from a private account. The money was described as compensation for surrendering his company shares. In return, Julian signed an agreement not to challenge the investigation or speak publicly about internal safety records. He was not an innocent man forced into exile. He accepted the money. He protected the company. And then he ran before facing Benjamin's widow or me. But he had not caused the fire. The lie I used to condemn him belonged to Meredith and Thomas. The silence that preserved it belonged to Julian. And the certainty that made the lie believable belonged to me. The microcassette recorder contained 3 tapes. The first carried Thomas's spoken confession. It repeated the letter and added details about altered computer files. The second tape contained a conversation recorded in Thomas's office 2 days after the fire. We listened through headphones. Thomas's younger voice spoke first. "The inspector will request the original order," Meredith answered. "Then we say it was mailed to the wrong office," Thomas said. "Julian knows," Meredith replied. "Julian also knows Dad will believe the heater before he believes him." I removed the headphones. The sentence was not only an admission of what Meredith planned. It was an accurate description of me. She knew my judgment of Julian was already waiting. She only needed to give it evidence. Naomi turned off the recorder. "There is another tape. I need a moment." I walked to the small window overlooking the bank lobby. People stood in lines, deposited checks, and discussed ordinary problems. No one below knew that a dead man's voice had just changed the meaning of half my life. The folded document tied with blue string was an original land trust agreement. It had been signed in 1986 when Eleanor's inheritance helped us purchase the riverfront property. I remembered the purchase. I did not remember the trust. The title had been placed temporarily in a holding company controlled by Thomas because a lawsuit against Rourke Bell Works made direct ownership difficult. The agreement stated that Thomas held the land for the benefit of Eleanor and our 2 children. After Eleanor's death, beneficial ownership would transfer equally to Meredith and Julian. The company possessed a permanent operating lease but did not own the land. If the agreement was valid, Astor Urban Holdings could not purchase the riverfront property without Julian's consent. The son I had not seen in 22 years owned half the ground beneath our company. Thomas's letter explained that the agreement had been hidden from later corporate records. During a refinancing 15 years earlier, Meredith discovered it. Thomas claimed she pressured him to sign a replacement declaration stating the holding company had transferred full ownership to Rourke Bell Works. He signed. Then guilt and fear led him to preserve the original agreement in the safe deposit box. By the end of the second hour, I had learned that my daughter concealed a fatal safety violation, framed her brother, forged my authority, and attempted to sell land she did not fully own. I believed there could be nothing worse. Then we played the third tape. It was Eleanor's voice. My wife had recorded the message 11 years before her death. "Daniel, if you are hearing this, Then Thomas finally did what I was too afraid to do. I gripped the edge of the table. Eleanor said she discovered the truth 8 years after the fire. She found copies of the inspector's order inside an old tax file. She confronted Thomas first. Then Meredith. Meredith admitted everything. She begged her mother not to tell me. By then, the company had recovered, Benjamin Carter's widow had remarried, and Julian had established a life somewhere in Oregon. Eleanor believed exposing the truth would destroy the company, reopen the family's grief, and perhaps send Meredith to prison. She remained silent. But she found Julian. For 14 years, my wife exchanged letters with our son. She spoke with him by telephone. She knew where he lived. She never told me. Her recorded voice trembled. I told myself I was protecting you from anger that would destroy what remained of the family. The truth is that I was protecting myself from being forced to choose between my children. Eleanor said Julian had married. He had a daughter. He worked repairing agricultural machinery and creating custom metal pieces. He refused to return while the official story remained unchanged. She asked him many times. He always gave the same answer. Dad does not want the truth. He wants the correct guilty person. Eleanor's message ended with an apology. I loved you, Daniel. But love became an excuse for deciding what you were allowed to know. The tape clicked off. Naomi waited. Maya looked down at her hands. I had entered the bank believing my daughter had betrayed me. Now I knew my partner, wife, son, and daughter had each built part of the same lie. Every one of them said they were protecting someone. No one had protected the truth. Naomi filed an emergency action preventing the land or company from being sold until the trust agreement and ownership records were examined. She also requested a forensic review of the power of attorney. The next morning, Meredith called an emergency board meeting. Before it began, she sent an email to every executive and department manager. The message said I was experiencing grief-related confusion, had become influenced by an outside attorney, and was threatening a transaction necessary to preserve employee pensions. She attached a physician's note from my hospital stay 2 years earlier. It described temporary disorientation caused by anesthesia. Meredith presented it as evidence of ongoing decline. By noon, employees had heard that I was trying to stop their retirement funds from being protected. My telephone began ringing. Some callers were angry. Others were frightened. A foreman named Leon Brooks asked whether his pension would disappear if the sale failed. I don't know, I told him. Meredith says it will. Meredith has not told me everything. That does not answer my question. He was right. Truth had given me evidence against my daughter. It had not given me a plan for 200 employees. Naomi arranged an independent cognitive evaluation. I completed memory tests, reasoning exercises, financial questions, and interviews lasting nearly 5 hours. The physician concluded that I had normal age-related memory changes but no impairment affecting my legal capacity. He also warned that I had become dependent on Meredith for information I remained capable of evaluating myself. You are competent, he said. But competence weakens when it is not used. The statement followed me for days. Meredith came to my house that evening. She entered using her key before I could answer the door. She carried financial projections and a copy of the court filing. You humiliated me in front of the board. You tried to enter my safe deposit box with a forged document. I used the power of attorney you signed after surgery. The witnesses deny signing it. Meredith placed the papers on my dining table. I recreated a damaged copy. The original was missing. You recreated my signature? I reproduced an authority you had already granted. That is forgery. That is a legal word for a practical decision. I stared at her. She sounded exactly like Thomas on the tape. Different facts. The same belief that necessity could rename an act. Did you blame Julian for the fire? Meredith became still. You played the recording. Yes. Then you know Thomas approved the decision. I asked what you did. Her eyes moved toward Eleanor's photograph on the wall. I kept the company alive. Benjamin Carter died. And exposing the shutdown order would not have brought him back. It would have eliminated 200 more incomes. You altered safety files. Thomas altered them. At your direction. I found a solution. You used your brother. Meredith's face hardened. Julian agreed. He took the money. He signed the silence agreement. He left Mom crying for 22 years. Your mother knew where he was. Meredith looked at me. You found her recording too. You knew she spoke with him? Yes. For how long? Years. You helped her hide it from me. I refused to participate. You knew. Knowing is not the same as helping. It becomes helping when your silence protects the lie. Meredith laughed once. There was no humor in it. You discovered that sentence today and already think it belongs only to everyone else. The accusation landed because it was deserved. She opened the financial projections. The pension fund was underfunded by $8 million. Environmental cleanup beneath the Eastern Hull could cost another $12 million. 2 major clients were withholding payments. The company had enough available cash for 6 weeks. Astor pays $41 million, Meredith said. They assume the pension shortage and environmental liability. Every employee receives at least 3 years of guaranteed employment or severance. And the riverfront land becomes condominiums. Eventually. How many workers remain after 3 years? I don't know. What do you receive? Her mouth tightened. A retention payment. How much? $2.4 million over 3 years. I leaned back. There it is. No, Dad. There is the easiest number for you to understand. Meredith pushed another sheet toward me. She had invested $1.7 million of her own money during the previous decade. She had mortgaged her house. Her husband had sold a commercial property inherited from his father. The retention payment would restore part of what they had already contributed. You could have asked me for help. I did. You told me not to bring you problems unless I also brought solutions. So I brought solutions. You brought me signatures. Because signatures were the only part you still wanted to provide. She stood. For years, I attended every meeting you skipped. I handled Mom's doctors. I answered employees at midnight. I found money whenever the company ran out. Then you walked into the plant twice a month and everyone called you the heart of the business. You chose to control everything. No. I chose not to let everything collapse while you waited for Julian to return and apologize. I was not waiting for him. You kept his workshop untouched for 22 years. You paid the heating bill in a room no one used. Do not tell me you were not waiting. Meredith gathered her papers. Then she placed a small card on the table. It carried a telephone number in Oregon. That is Julian's number. How did you get it? Mom gave it to me before she died. Have you spoken to him? Once. What did he say? He said he wanted nothing from us. She moved toward the door. Then she turned. Call him before you decide he was the only person we wronged. I waited until morning. Then I dialed the number. A man answered after 6 rings. His voice was deeper than I remembered. But the pause before he said hello belonged to my son. Julian? He did not respond. This is your father. I know. My hand began shaking. I opened Thomas's safe deposit box. Julian exhaled slowly. So Meredith finally needed the land. You knew about the trust? Mom told me. Why didn't you contact me? I did. Once, the year after the fire. Meredith answered. She said you would call the police if I came near the company. I never said that. I know that now. At the time, it sounded like you. We remained silent. I am sorry, I said. Julian laughed quietly. You have had 22 years to prepare something longer. I did not know. You did not ask. I asked who started the fire. You asked me to give you a guilty person. When I tried to explain the shutdown order, you called it an excuse. Why did you take Thomas's money? Julian did not answer immediately. When he spoke, the defensiveness had disappeared. Because I was 30 years old, terrified, and angry enough to confuse leaving with winning. Because Mom needed medical insurance. Because Thomas said Benjamin's widow would lose the settlement if the insurer proved company fraud. And because part of me wanted the money. You could have returned later. Yes. Why didn't you? Every year I stayed away made returning require a larger explanation. Eventually, I built a life in which I was not Daniel Rourke's guilty son. You allowed your mother to lie to me. She asked me not to contact you. She believed the truth would destroy you. And what did you believe? Julian's voice became quiet. I believed you would choose the company again. The words hurt because I could not confidently say he was wrong. I need you to come home. No. The land may belong partly to you. I don't care about the land. The company is being sold. That is not my company. Your sister concealed the trust. My sister kept 200 people employed while you signed whatever she gave you. You are defending her? I am refusing to make this simple for you. Julian said he would speak with Naomi. He would not promise to return. Before ending the call, he asked one question. Did Mom sound afraid on the recording? Yes. She always sounded afraid when she had already decided something for someone else. Then he hung up. The forensic accountant arrived 2 days later. Her name was Selina Ward. She reviewed 20 years of company files, debt reports, pension statements, and property records. Her findings confirmed the crisis. Rourke Bell Works was worth less as an operating company than the debt attached to it. The riverfront land created almost all the value in Astor's offer. Without the sale, the company needed at least $15 million within 3 months. No lender would provide it while land ownership remained disputed. Then Selina found something Meredith had not mentioned. For 18 years, the company had made annual payments to a consulting firm called North Coast Technical Services. The payments began 1 year after the fire. They totaled nearly $900,000. The company had no reports, invoices, or technical work from North Coast. The business address led to a postal box in Oregon. Julian controlled the company. Meredith had been sending money to our son for almost 2 decades. I called her immediately. She did not deny it. Thomas promised Julian continuing compensation for surrendering his shares. After Thomas became ill, I maintained the payments. Why hide them as consulting fees? Because you reviewed executive distributions. I knew what you would do if you saw Julian's name. You told me he wanted nothing from us. He told me he wanted nothing from you. The payments were part of the agreement. Did he know they came from the company? Yes. When I confronted Julian, he admitted accepting them. He said part was compensation for the shares Thomas forced him to surrender. Part supported his family when he struggled to find work under his own name. He had not merely remained silent to protect us. The lie had paid his mortgage. I stopped taking the money 3 years ago, he said. Why? Because my daughter found the agreement. She asked why her education had been paid by people I claimed I no longer knew. What did you tell her? The truth. She has barely spoken to me since. Everyone in our family had eventually been exposed by a child asking a question adults believed could be postponed. The child connected to Benjamin Carter asked the next one. Her name was Clara Carter. She was 21 years old and worked as a junior safety engineer at Rourke Bell Works. Meredith had hired her 2 years earlier through a scholarship program created in Benjamin's name. Clara knew her father died in the fire. She believed the cause was employee negligence. She did not know the company ignored a shutdown order. Naomi warned that Thomas's confession and original records could reopen the wrongful death settlement. Clara and her mother might be entitled to substantial compensation. Regulators could also investigate historical fraud. Disclosure might eliminate any possibility of saving the company. Meredith asked for a private meeting. We met inside the old Eastern Hall, which had been rebuilt after the fire and converted into a training center. She stood beneath a wall displaying safety awards. The irony seemed invisible to her. "If you give those tapes to Clara," Astor walks away. "Her father died. She already received a settlement. Based on a lie. A settlement that paid for her home and education. You do not get to decide when another person has received enough for losing someone. And you do?" Meredith stepped closer. "Tell me what happens after your noble confession." "The buyer withdraws. The bank culls the loans. The pension fund enters court supervision. 200 people lose their jobs. Clara receives a lawsuit against an empty company. Then we find another solution. You have been absent from the numbers for 15 years, and now you believe morality is a financing plan." The words echoed through the hall. "What would you have me do?" I asked. "Complete the sale. Create a private compensation fund for Clara and her mother. Protect the pensions. Keep the historical details confidential. You want to purchase their silence again. I want the truth to help someone instead of merely destroying everyone." I looked at my daughter. She was not defending herself alone. She had built an entire moral system in which outcomes were real and consent was a luxury. "Did you ever plan to tell Clara?" "No." The honesty surprised me. "Did you ever plan to tell me about Julian?" "No." "Or the land trust?" "No." Why? Because every truth required you to become someone you had never shown yourself capable of becoming. What kind of person? One who could be wrong without making everyone else pay for discovering it. I had no answer. That night, I listened again to Eleanor's recording. Then I opened the box containing her letters and journals. I searched until dawn. Inside a notebook from the final year of her life, I found one sentence underlined twice. "Daniel thinks decisions belong to whoever feels most certain." I had spent the week condemning Meredith for controlling everyone through certainty. I had taught her the language. Julian returned home 4 days before the scheduled sale. He did not come for me. He came because Clara Carter had learned Naomi was seeking information about the fire and contacted him herself. Julian arrived at the company wearing a faded canvas jacket and carrying no luggage. His hair was gray. His shoulders were broader than I remembered. A scar crossed the back of one hand. We faced each other outside the Eastern Hall. Employees watched from windows. For 22 years, I had imagined our reunion. Sometimes I struck him. Sometimes I embraced him. Sometimes he fell to his knees and confessed. In reality, neither of us moved. "You look like Thomas," I said. Julian's expression tightened. "That is a terrible way to begin." "I don't know how to begin. That makes two of us." Meredith approached from the main office. When she saw him, she stopped. Julian looked at his sister. "You still keep the Eastern Hall open during inspection repairs?" "No. We learned something." "Did we?" Meredith ignored the question. "You cannot appear here without warning. I own half the land, apparently. You accepted payment for your shares. Company shares. Not Mom's land trust. You knew about the trust and stayed silent. I did not know you planned to sell. You accepted 18 years of payments. So did you. What does that mean? You received salary increases, bonuses, and control because I remained the guilty son. Do not pretend I was the only person whose silence paid well. Their argument carried the precision of one repeated privately for decades. Then Clara entered the hall. She was small, with Benjamin's dark hair and the same direct gaze I remembered from the only photograph his widow had shown me. She looked first at Julian. Did you start the fire that killed my father? No. Did you know the company was violating a shutdown order? Yes. Did you tell investigators? No. Did someone pay you to remain silent? Yes. Julian did not add explanations until she requested them. For once, no one attempted to improve the truth before delivering it. Clara turned toward Meredith. Did you alter the records? Yes. Did you create the scholarship in my father's name because you felt guilty? Meredith hesitated. Yes. Did you hire me because of who I was? At first. Why? I wanted to know whether you were all right. Clara's face twisted. You could have asked. I did not believe you would speak to me if you knew. So you created a version of my life where you could watch me without being judged. Meredith lowered her eyes. Yes. Clara looked at me last. What did you know? Nothing. She waited. I corrected myself. I knew my son said the safety order existed. I chose not to believe him. I knew the company benefited from blaming one person. I did not examine that benefit. So you knew enough not to ask? Yes. Clara requested copies of every record. Naomi provided them. She did not promise to sue. She did not promise to remain quiet. She said she needed to speak with her mother. Then she resigned from the company and left. Astor Urban Holdings withdrew its offer the following morning. The company's lender issued a default notice. Meredith called me from the boardroom. Her voice was calm. It is happening exactly as I said. Yes. Are you satisfied? No. Then what was the point? I looked through my kitchen window toward the river in the distance. The point was that Clara's decision belonged to her. And the employees? Their decisions should belong to them too. Meredith laughed bitterly. You have 12 days of moral clarity and now you want workplace democracy. I want to stop treating people as consequences instead of participants. What does that mean in money? I did not know. But for the first time, I admitted it. Selena, Naomi, Julian, Meredith, and 5 elected employee representatives spent the next 10 days examining alternatives. The meetings were ugly. No one trusted anyone. We discovered that the operating company could survive if the land was separated from it, the eastern section was sold, and pension obligations were placed inside an independently managed trust. A regional infrastructure firm offered $11 million for the fabrication business without the land. It promised to retain 160 employees. The remaining workers would receive severance funded by a partial land sale. The city offered to purchase 7 riverfront acres for a public park and environmental restoration project. The price was far lower than the condominium developers' offer. But it removed much of the cleanup liability. Julian and Meredith each agreed to place their land interests into a new trust. 40% of future lease and sale proceeds would fund employee pensions. 20% would support environmental cleanup and workplace safety education. The remaining amount would be divided between them. Clara and her mother filed a civil claim. I offered my entire remaining company interest as part of a settlement fund. Meredith contributed her retention rights and a portion of her personal assets. Julian returned the final 5 years of payments he had received through North Coast. None of it made Benjamin alive. None of it made the original settlement honest. It was not redemption. It was payment made after the people responsible could no longer pretend they had already paid enough. Regulators opened investigations into the old safety records and recent power of attorney forgery. The age of the fire limited several criminal charges. The newer forgery did not. Meredith pleaded guilty to submitting a falsified legal instrument and attempting unauthorized access to the safe deposit box. She received probation, financial penalties, and a prohibition against serving as an officer or trustee for 5 years. Some employees believed the punishment was excessive. They remembered the payroll she saved and the nights she spent repairing crises. Others believed she should have gone to prison. They remembered how easily she used people's fear to justify taking choices away from them. Both groups were describing the same woman. Julian was not charged. But Clara's lawsuit named him as a participant in the concealment. He settled separately and testified under oath. During his deposition, Clara's attorney asked why he accepted money. Julian gave the same answer he gave me. Because fear made leaving feel necessary, and money made necessity comfortable. The answer appeared in the newspaper. Julian carried the clipping in his wallet. He said it prevented him from rewriting his own role when shame became inconvenient. Rourke Bell Works was sold without the riverfront land 6 months later. The name remained for 1 year before employees voted to change it to Riverforge Cooperative. I expected the change to hurt. Instead, I felt relief. Our names had remained above the entrance long after our behavior stopped deserving the space. 163 jobs survived. 49 did not. Every number represented a household that could not be comforted by hearing the outcome had been better than bankruptcy. Leon Brooks was among those who remained. He joined the pension trust board. At the first meeting, he told me, "You founders spent 50 years saying employees were family. It is interesting how long it took before anyone allowed us to read the family documents." I had no defense. Meredith and I did not speak for 4 months after her sentencing. She said I had chosen Julian, Clara, and strangers over my own daughter. I told her accountability was not abandonment. She replied that people who are not being punished always find that distinction comforting. She was not entirely wrong. I wrote her letters. The first 3 explained my decisions. I tore them up. The 4th described her decisions. I tore that one up too. Eventually, I wrote, "I relied on you until being needed became the only place you felt secure. I praised Julian's gifts and treated your reliability as something that renewed itself. I taught you that results mattered more than permission whenever the company was in danger. You carried those lessons farther than I did, but you did not learn them alone." I did not ask her to forgive me. I did not ask her to visit. I mailed the letter. She answered 2 weeks later. Her letter contained one sentence. "I do not know who I am when no one needs me to fix the emergency." I replied, "You are allowed to find out without creating another one." Julian remained in Pennsylvania for almost a year. He rented a small apartment rather than staying with me. He worked temporarily at the Cooperative Training Center, teaching apprentices traditional forging methods. Our relationship developed through practical tasks. We repaired a gate at my house. We rebuilt the old coal furnace Thomas and I had used during our first year. We sorted tools neither of us wanted but neither could throw away. For several months, we discussed everything except the fire. Then one evening, Julian found the fountain pen Meredith had brought to the bank. "Mom gave you this?" "For our anniversary. She bought one for me too." "I didn't know. There was a lot you didn't know." The bitterness in his voice was familiar. This time, I did not defend myself. "I would like to know now." Julian looked at me. "That does not give me back the years when knowing would have mattered." "No. It doesn't." He sat across from me. Then he asked, "Why did you believe them instead of me?" I had prepared answers involving evidence, shock, and responsibility. All of them were partly true. None reached the center. Because believing you were reckless allowed me to remain a good father who had been betrayed. Believing Meredith and Thomas meant I did not have to examine the deadlines I imposed or the culture I created. You were the explanation that protected everyone else. Julian looked down at the pen. That is the first answer you have given me that sounds expensive. What does that mean? It cost you something to say. We did not embrace. He did not forgive me. But the following morning, he returned to finish repairing the gate. Clara Carter eventually returned to River Forge Cooperative. Not as an employee. She joined the Independent Safety Oversight Committee created through the settlement. Her first proposal required every shutdown order to be sent directly to workers, regulators, and multiple board members. No single executive could conceal one again. At the meeting where the policy was adopted, Clara looked at Meredith, Julian, and me. Meredith had been invited as part of the historical review. This policy assumes that good people may become dangerous when they believe too much depends on them, Clara said. It does not require us to decide in advance who the bad person will be. Thomas would have appreciated the precision. Eleanor would have understood the warning. 2 years after the bank appointment, Meredith asked to meet Maya Patel. I did not know about the meeting until afterward. Meredith apologized for attempting to pressure her and for using a false document. Maya accepted the apology but refused Meredith's offer to make a donation to the bank's financial abuse program. She suggested Meredith donate anonymously elsewhere. Not every apology needs to create evidence that you were generous, Maya told her. Meredith later said it was the most insulting useful sentence anyone had ever given her. I kept box 418. The bank replaced its lock. Meredith's authority was removed. The annual fee increased. I paid it gladly. The original documents eventually moved into Court and Company archives. The box now contains copies. Thomas's letter. Eleanor's recording. The land trust. The falsified power of attorney. It also contains 4 newer letters. One from me. One from Meredith. One from Julian. And one from Clara. We wrote them for our children and grandchildren. No one was permitted to edit another person's version. Meredith's letter says she believes saving 200 jobs justified taking decisions away from people who might stop her. She does not ask the reader to agree. Julian says he allowed himself to be purchased because being paid made victimhood easier to carry than responsibility. Clara says compensation and justice overlap, but they are not the same thing. Mine says, when everyone around you hides the truth to manage your reaction, examine the reaction before congratulating yourself on being protected. Last spring, the city opened the riverfront park on the eastern 7 acres. A section of the old fabrication hall remains as a memorial and safety education center. Benjamin Carter's name is above the entrance. Not Thomas Bell's. Not mine. Not the company's. Clara selected the inscription. No deadline makes a preventable risk necessary. Meredith attended the opening. Julian stood near the back. I sat between neither of them. After the ceremony, Meredith approached her brother. They had spoken only through attorneys in formal meetings for nearly 3 years. I am sorry, she said. Julian looked toward the memorial entrance. For blaming me? For knowing Dad would believe it. That is not the same apology. No. It is the more honest one. Julian nodded. I am sorry I took the money and left you to carry everything afterward. You were not responsible for what I did. No. But my absence gave you more power and fewer people willing to challenge it. Meredith looked at him. Do you forgive me? No. Do you think you ever will? I don't know. She accepted the answer. Years earlier, she would have explained why another answer was more useful. They walked through the park together for 12 minutes. Then Julian left. Meredith did not call the conversation reconciliation. That restraint was progress. My daughter took me to close a safe deposit box because she believed the papers inside threatened everything she had spent her life protecting. She was right. The documents ended a sale, exposed a fatal deception, damaged our family, cost dozens of jobs, and stripped our name from the company we built. But the papers did not create those consequences. They revealed decisions that had been accumulating interest for 22 years. Meredith believed destroying the evidence would protect the employees. Thomas believed altering records would protect the company. Eleanor believed hiding Julian would protect me. Julian believed accepting money would protect his mother and himself. I believed refusing doubt would protect my authority. Every one of us used protection as a word for control when the person being protected was not allowed to choose. The banker's note contained only 2 sentences. It did not accuse Meredith of greed. It did not tell me what decision to make. It simply warned me not to sign before I understood. That was the freedom our family had denied one another for years. The space between being pressured and deciding. I am 76 now. Meredith visits every other Sunday. She calls before entering, even though she still has a key. Julian lives in Oregon again. We speak twice a month. Sometimes the calls last an hour. Sometimes they end after 5 uncomfortable minutes. Neither of us pretends frequency is the same as closeness. Clara sends me the annual safety report. I read every page. When I do not understand a section, I ask. That sounds small. Most meaningful changes do. Last month, Meredith drove me to the bank. I needed to place my updated will inside box 418. At the entrance, she stopped. I will wait here. You can come inside the lobby. I know. But the box belongs to you. Maya Patel was still working at the branch. She greeted us, verified my identification, and asked whether I wanted anyone to accompany me. I looked at Meredith. She made no gesture. She did not answer for me. No, I said. I will go alone. Meredith nodded. I will be here when you are finished. Inside the vault, I opened the box and placed my will beside the 4 letters. Then I read Maya's original yellow note, which I had preserved in a plastic sleeve. The handwriting had faded slightly. The warning had not. I closed the lid, locked the box, and returned to the lobby. Meredith was seated near the window. She did not ask what I had placed inside. She did not ask what my will said. She only stood and asked, "Are you ready to go?" For most of my life, I believed trust meant not needing questions. Now I understand that trust is being allowed to answer them yourself. Yes, I told her. I am ready. And this time, the decision was mine.